course, we'll be handing it over. It's almost 7 o'clock, so it is almost time to say a farewell. So thank you very much to my panel and to my guests tonight. I will end the show the way that I started the show, which is sending my love, my regards, my solidarity to everyone that's suffering because of that horrendous terror attack today. We know that 2 innocent people have lost their lives, and we know that 4 people are currently in hospital fighting for theirs. We send all of them affected by this and the broader community all of our best wishes. But that's goodbye from me, and I shall hand you over to Martin Daubney. Night.
Thank you, Michelle Dewberry. An excellent show, very, very thought-provoking on a sincerely and utterly dark, dark day. I think not just for the Jewish community, but for all of the United Kingdom. And where are we? How do we get to this position? What can be done about it? The Prime Minister gave a statement earlier on, but were they just empty words? Well, welcome to Farage with me, Martin Daubney, coming up on tonight's show.
The attack has been officially declared as a terrorist incident.
2 people have been murdered in Manchester at the Heaton Park Synagogue in a suspected terror attack on the holiest of days in the Jewish calendar, Yom Kippur.
Earlier today, on Yom Kippur, the holiest day for the Jewish community, a vile individual committed a terrorist attack.
And the suspect, now pictured on your screens, was shot dead at the scene and remains for now unnamed. But police have confirmed that 2 further arrests have been made. But tonight we'll be taking you live back to the scene, speaking to some of the greatest minds on the subject of anti-Semitism and asking the most morbid question of all: is any of this a surprise? That's all to come in tonight's show, but first is your latest news headlines with Katie Bowen.
Martin, thank you and good evening. Continuing coverage of the terror attack in Manchester throughout the evening. But in other news today, Metropolitan Police Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley says he will not resign following a BBC Panorama investigation which reveals Met officers making racist and misogynistic comments. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer has described the footage as shocking, adding that the Commissioner needs to be very robust in his response. The footage appears to show some officers at a central London police station calling for immigrants to be shot and brag about using violence against suspects. Sir Mark Rowley said people in London can trust the vast majority of the force's officers, adding that he was horrified by the documentary. Elsewhere, Sir Keir Starmer says there will be no golden ticket to settling in the UK under plans to require refugees to earn their right to stay long-term. The government plans to end automatic family union rights for those granted asylum in the UK and change the requirements for long-term settlement. New applications for the existing refugee family reunion route have been suspended since September, while the plan, backed by up to £3 million, will include encouraging people to stay in the region and take up jobs there. Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood will set out reforms in full later in the autumn that will see refugees face a longer route to resettlement. And Baroness Michelle Mone has said she will not step down from the House of Lords as she accused Chancellor Rachel Reeves of using dangerous and inflammatory language about her. It comes as Baroness Mone was ordered to repay millions of pounds for breaching a COVID-19 PPE contract. The Chancellor is reported to have joked that the government had a vendetta against the Conservative peer during a fringe event at Labour's party conference this week. In a letter to the Prime Minister, Baroness Mone accused the Chancellor of endangering her and her family with the comments. Those are the latest GBNews headlines. Now let's return to events in Manchester today with Martin Daubney.
Tune in to GB News Radio wherever you are, online, on DAB Digital Radio, on TuneIn, on Radio Player and on your smart speaker. Just say, play GB News.
Thank you, Katie, and welcome back to Farage with me tonight, your host, Martin Daubney. Now, today, 2 British Jews were brutally killed at Heaton Park Synagogue in Manchester in a terror attack, with 3 others remaining in a serious condition. Now, as a reminder, we are going to play the moment that the suspect was shot dead by armed police at the scene. But I should say that the footage is disturbing and that viewer discretion is advised.
We've killed him. No, Hell, Lucas. Everybody else, get back! If you're not involved, move back! Get away! Somebody stay with casualties! Everybody else, he has a ball! Go away! He's got a bomb on him! He's got a bomb! Mate, he's got a... Man, he's got a bomb on his jacket, mate! He's trying to go in and... Now! He's got bombs on him!
And in reaction to that, here was Sir Keir Starmer moments ago, having dramatically flown back to the UK to chair an emergency Cobra meeting.
Earlier today, on Yom Kippur, the holiest day for the Jewish community, a vile individual committed a terrorist attack that attacked Jews because they are Jews, and attacked Britain because of our values. And while this is not a new hate, this is something Jews have always lived with, we must be clear. It is a hatred that is rising once again, and Britain must defeat it once again.
Well, on a dark day for Britain, I'm now joined by Lord Fink, the Conservative peer who grew up 5 minutes from the synagogue in question and was a member there for 10 years. Lord Fink, welcome to the show. And a truly dark day for Britain, not just for Jewish people, I think for the entire nation. What are your thoughts?
I think it is a dark day, but sadly many of us have seen something like this coming, although I would have never predicted it to be there and in this way. But with hate marches on the street every week in every major city, I saw something was brewing.
Lord Fink, you know what's astonishing is that right now at Parliament Square, right now, there is a pro-Gaza demonstration on the same day that 2 British Jews were killed at a synagogue. What happened?
When you say what happened, I mean, I was actually caught up in the first one of the Gaza marches shortly after the date of the horror attack. And Israel hadn't even counterattacked at that point. So when people say that they're marching in sympathy with the victims in Gaza, there were no victims in Gaza at that time. It was a pure anti-Israel march. It was a hate march. They were shouting from the river to the sea, which literally means from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, which means they would do a genocide against Israel. And for our police and our authorities to accept those marches every single week in the busiest area of London was madness. I just don't understand why it's allowed.
Well, they have been allowed, and they're going on right now, not only in London, we understand, but actually in Manchester. Right now in Manchester, there is also a pro-Gaza demonstration. Sir Keir Starmer addressed the nation short while ago, offering his condolences to the families, and his answer was more security. I've been speaking with Jewish people throughout the world, throughout the show, my previous show, 3 till 6, and they say they don't want more security. Security is an admission of failure. What do we need to do?
I think we have to take a balanced view. The Jewish community arrived in Britain over several hundred years, but by and large, I'd say 95% have integrated incredibly well. And I certainly regard myself as more British than I do Jewish, truthfully. I don't think that's true of later arrivals, some later immigrants, particularly more recent ones. So I think there has to be full integration. I find it strange that people have come here to flee countries that were fundamentalist Muslim countries, and they arrive here and they want to turn Britain into a little example of the country they fled. I don't understand that. I know many Muslims who live life and are British in the way I would be British, but there's an awful lot who see their religion and their original nationality as being more important than being British and European. And that I have an issue with. I also have an issue with the fact that both in Parliament and in the media, the situation in Israel attracts probably 20 times as much attention as more major conflicts around the world. And I don't understand the obsession of the media and parliamentarians with this one issue. I remember going back to the time of the first Project Cast Lead when the Sri Lankan Tamil crisis was on, and the casualties in Sri Lanka were multiples of the time of amounts that there were in Israel and Gaza. And yet Sri Lanka got about 1% of the TV coverage. How is that proportionate? And no questions in Parliament virtually. So I just think people need to take a balanced view on the events, take a rational view of what happened. Israel was attacked. In the attack, Hamas committed at least 3 war crimes. They attacked civilian targets, they took civilian hostages, and then they sheltered their troops behind civilians, all 3 of which are listed as war crimes, and yet nobody mentions that.
Lord Fink, we don't know yet the motives of the terrorist today. We have to await the police and be patient on that. But there are some startling figures coming out of attitudes amongst British Muslims. The Henry Jackson Society conducted a survey in March of last year, and I believe maybe attitudes have calcified even since then. Something that just leapt out. 75% of British Muslims believe that Israel has no right to exist.
I'm shocked, but not totally surprised about that. There is a widespread education. In fact, I think the urban myth in London schools is that 9/11, the original attack on New York and America, was a retaliation for the invasion of Afghanistan. So the whole facts and history is wrong. And I find it strange that teachers in schools can't teach what happened just in terms of objective facts, because everything seems to be politicized and changed. And with social media being unregulated, some of the stuff on social media is just a total falsification of facts. These are not opinions, they're just timelines of things that happened. So I believe schools, the authorities, the media, parents, we all have an obligation to try and teach people what the facts were, and then the opinions can follow. But the truth is, Israel has been there now as a country since 1948. It will stay. It's one of the most thriving economies in the world. Its technology lead in the world in areas of biotech as well as military weapons is amazing for a country of that size. I don't agree with every single Israel policy. I don't feel it's my right to stand there and cast stones at Israel, but I don't agree with everything they do. On the other hand, I do believe they're the only vibrant democracy in the Middle East, and as such, we should be supporting them.
OK, Lord Fink, thank you for your contribution tonight on Yom Kippur. That ends at 7:23 in around about 11 minutes' time. Today of all days. Lord Fink, thank you very much for joining us on Farage tonight. Now, I'm also joined in the studio by my panel tonight. That's the former Attorney General, Sir Michael Ellis, and the former Labour Cabinet Minister, Sean Woodward. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Sir Michael, I'm going to start with you. You just told me that you walked through that protest at Parliament Square, now on the day of a double killing and on the day of Yom Kippur. I'm astonished by that.
Well, it's extraordinary, and people driving in their cars with Palestinian flags and slogans and banners. And it does remind me of, as Lord Fink just mentioned, of October the 7th, 2023, 2 years ago, when before Israel had responded at all, there was a violent demonstration outside the Israeli embassy. They couldn't claim, of course, that that was because of anything Israel had done, because Israel hadn't reacted yet. But you still saw that first hate march. And as has been alluded to by numerous guests today on your channel, there have been repeated hate marches in this country, and it is an apposite name to call them. I prosecuted in the courts of this country, starting nearly 30 years ago, and I have personally prosecuted offences under the Public Order Act which have been got away with here in these hate marches. I've seen on television offences which have not been dealt with. So I do not accept that there is anything other than a two-tier justice. And coming from a former Attorney General, a recent former Attorney General, I think that is a problem, because we have seen almost weekly hate marches. We've seen marches outside and near synagogues on a Saturday, the holy day of the week for Jews, clearly with the consequences of that. But we've also seen, and let's just bear this in mind, because I'm afraid it does bear mentioning, only a few days ago, Hamas, one of the world's most horrific terrorist organisations, praised the British and French governments for recognising the Palestinian state. Now, no one, well, not many people, would deny the right of the Palestinians to have a state. But doing that now, as Britain and France have just done, has sent a signal which Hamas themselves have seen as a justification for the 7th of October attacks. That is the sort of thing that we have to see in context, because the Jewish community of this country have felt seriously under threat because of this relentless, as Lord Fink was alluding to, relentless coverage, disproportionate attention. In Parliament, there have been dozens of debates on this and very few on Sudan.
OK, let's bring in Sean Woodward now, former Labour Cabinet Minister. Keir Starmer gave a statement to the nation today. He said, "This is a hatred that is rising once again." Of course, talking about anti-Semitism. Does the Labour Party have to take a long, hard look in the mirror in its position on this, recognising the state of Palestine, this week has been condemned by Israel, it's been condemned around the world? And yet, we heard a lot at the conference this week about the rising racism in Britain, but it was focused on the far right. It was focused on Nigel Farage. It was focused on the sympathy that Shabana Mahmood herself said that she felt as a British Muslim post 9/11 and post 7/7. Not a single mention of anti-Semitism, the racism which had almost become fashionable in Britain.
Well, the first thing I want to say, Martin, is that my thoughts are first and foremost with the families of those who've lost their lives right now. And they are with the lives of those people who are battling for their lives in hospital right now. So whatever I say is said through the prism of recognising the agony that those families and everybody around them are suffering. And that's never out of my mind in anything I'm about to say. I think it's very important as well to be fair about what the Prime Minister said this afternoon, which included saying, I recognise that for every Jewish person in this country right now, they are afraid. And I, as Prime Minister, want a message to every one of those Jewish people that we hold you, we wrap you in our arms. So I think we've got to be a bit careful here of inflaming things rather than... Just a moment, let me...
Things are already inflamed. We've seen a double killing today off the back of 2 years of constant protesting. It's too late to say calm things down. Look at the situation, what happened today.
Martin, the bloodshed did not begin today or yesterday. This has been going on for a really long time, seeking a political solution to what has been endless violence is not the wrong thing to do, it's the right thing to do. And the decision that you earmark as does the Labour Party have to take a hard look at itself right now. 130 countries, not just Britain and France, have decided that it is right to recognise the state of Palestine. It's not just the Labour Party. It's not just this government. It's not just Britain and France.
Most of those...
It's 100... No, Michael,
Sean,
let me finish.
Most did that well before the attack, though, Sean.
No.
To be fair, most of those 130...
But I do not think that allowing people who've committed this senseless, terrible violence the room to actually stop us seeking a peaceful solution is the right way to go. And forgive me, but having been, you've cited your work as Attorney General, let me cite mine as Secretary of State for Northern Ireland and completing the peace process. I believe that we did the right thing to seek a political solution to the violence that was taking place in Northern Ireland. And it was the right thing to build on the work of John Major, to create, in the Labour government under Tony Blair, the Good Friday Agreement.
Britain has a standing for Northern Ireland and it has its own historical position for Northern Ireland. It doesn't for Israel. I'm afraid the UK, under this government, has positioned itself as hostile to Israel.
Nonsense.
And it has done that.
Absolute nonsense,
that is the
Michael.
perception, I think, from the Israeli authorities, bearing in mind what their ministers have said. And the recognition of Palestine as a state at this moment, in the last few days, is the key factor. Most of those 130 countries that chose to do it did it years ago.
Michael, that completely removes the context of what the British government did on and immediately after October
I'm afraid
the 7th.
Hamas
It couldn't have been more clear where the British government stood with the people of Israel after the atrocity of October the 7th.
If you've got Hamas praising you, you're in the wrong.
Gentlemen, we have to move on. Leave it there for the time being. Thank you both, Sean Woodward, Sir Michael Ellis. Now, coming up after the break, more reaction to today's horrific anti-Semitic terrorist attack.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health. Whatever happens in the White House today
will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, D.C.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Farage. With me tonight, your host, Martin Dorby. Now, today, 2 British Jews were brutally killed at the Heaton Park Synagogue in Manchester in a terror attack, with 3 others in a serious condition. We're once again going to play the moments that the suspect was killed by armed police at the scene, but I should say that the footage is disturbing and that viewer discretion is advised. Of course, these scenes are genuinely horrific, but here's the big question. Are they actually that much of a surprise? Or has there been a tragic sense of inevitability just 5 days away from the 2nd anniversary of the October 7th pogrom? Well, let's go back in time and to remind ourselves, because within a day, anti-Israel protesters targeted the Israeli embassy in London before Israel had even responded to the biggest massacre of Jewish people since the Holocaust. And in the weeks and months that followed, we saw balaclavas, calls to globalise the Intifada, fireworks and intimidation. And next, Islamists came out in their swathes calling for jihad.
What is the solution to liberate people in the concentration camps of Palestine? Jihad! What is the solution? Jihad! Allah Jihad! Jihad! Jihad!
Who could forget this grotesque moment? The Intifada Brigade projected this message onto Parliament as the police watched idly by. I was there that night. I stood in Parliament Square as it happened, and I begged the police to stop that projection, a projection that shamed the world. They did absolutely nothing, no interest whatsoever. What about the time that police told a Jewish man he couldn't walk by a Palestine protest because he was visibly Jewish?
You are quite openly Jewish. This is a pro-Palestinian march. I'm not accusing you of anything, but I'm worried about the reaction to your presence. You choose to remain here because you are called the rich Jews. If I remain here, you are arrested. Because your presence is antagonising a large people and we can't deal with all of that.
The Jewish man was antagonising the protesters. Well, whether it was the BBC's disastrous decision to air a documentary from the perspective of a child member of Hamas or accusations of two-tier policing at the weekly Palestine protest, it has been clear for some time that the situation for the Jewish community in Britain has been rapidly deteriorating. For nearly 2 years now, not just British Jews, but the entire British public have been subjected to weekly displays of thuggery, anti-Semitism, anti-British hatred and outright Islamist extremism and its unholy alliance with the radical left. And one day people look back on the tragic events of today and wonder, why didn't people see the warning signs? Why didn't Britain's leaders heed the warnings? And why didn't we do anything to try and stop the carnage? I'm joined now in the studio by the counter-extremism expert and the founder of the Kurdists, Maajid Nawaz, as well as my panel, the former Attorney General Sir Michael Ellis and the former Labour Cabinet Minister Sean Woodward. Gentlemen, welcome. Maajid Nawaz, let's start with you. As I understand it as well, you also just walked through Parliament Square. There's a protest right now, a pro-Gaza protest on the day 2 British Jews were killed. And seriously, why don't these guys have a day off?
Well, the attack was in the morning. First of all, allow me to express my deepest sorrow and condemnation for this anti-Semitic attack in Manchester. Of course, the attack being in the morning, the protest organisers may well have found it better to decide to have a day off and cancel. They had plenty of time.
But they didn't do that.
No, they didn't. I walked past them just now.
And why do you think they didn't? Because their cause, they clearly see, is much more important than the death of Jews on British soil.
Well, I can't speak for them, but I do know that there is a peace deal on the table, a 21-point plan peace deal. Hamas is yet to accept the deal. So, if I may, we can go broader to look at groups such as the terrorist groups such as Hamas and wonder why it is it's taking them so long to accept the peace deal for Gaza that is on the table. That could resolve all of this in an instant. Of course, anti-Semitism has been building over the last 2 years in the UK. Of course, foreign policy and how people perceive foreign policy directly feeds back into our domestic social cohesion. It's always been the case. But what the horrific attacks that have just happened this morning take us back to the counter-extremism years in what I call the bad old days of terrorism in the UK, 7/7 attacks. We don't want to go back there. Now, there is a peace deal on the table. Hamas are yet to accept this peace deal, but 8 Muslim-majority countries have backed President Trump's plan. They include nuclear power Pakistan. They include military power Turkey, NATO member. They include Saudi Arabia, a key strategic leader of the Muslim world. They include Indonesia, the most populous Muslim nation. And they include the UAE, Qatar, and these other countries in the Gulf. It's time that Hamas recognised that continued war doesn't get us anywhere, and they must accept Trump's 21-point plan.
Here's the point. What if they don't want peace? What if they do want, from the river to the sea, to see the Jewish state eradicated. They want the Jewish people removed from the surface of the earth. And what actually, if people in Britain agree with that?
Well, thankfully, people in Britain don't agree with that. Thankfully, when we at the Accordists...
Do you think so?
Well, when we surveyed the British public, out of those who expressed an opinion, 91% want better relations between Arabs and Israelis. That's what Trump's 21-point plan can bring about. Unfortunately, there are those that are ideologically driven to oppose peace because they are ideologically driven to continue conflict and war. And it's interesting, we note, every time we get so close to peace, whether it's 1981 with Anwar Sadat in Egypt, who was assassinated for wanting peace with Israel, whether it's 1995 with Yitzhak Rabin, who was assassinated for, as an Israeli PM, wanting peace with Arabs, whether it's the October the 7th attacks in 2023 when Saudi Arabia was just about to join President Trump's Abraham Accords, or it's now with this Manchester synagogue attack, we know that the 21-point peace plan has just been put forward, and yet again, terrorists rear their heads to try and destroy the chances and destroy the hope in peace. And we've got to remain focused at this moment and recognise what they're seeking to achieve. They are seeking to destroy our hope in peace, to destroy our hope in the fact that we believe that we can all live together in this great country called Britain. And we've got to defy that intention of theirs by continuing to remain focused and recognising that those who have an ideological agenda for war and to destroy peace, they must be isolated. We must not provide them any succour. We must not provide them any legitimisation. And when it comes to attacks such as this, a straightforward, and it would behoove all my fellow Muslims in this country to recognise, a straightforward condemnation with no ifs, no buts, no excuses is the best approach in this current situation. It's the only humane approach as well.
Excellent. So let's bring in my panel now. Sir Michael Ellis, you're keen to interject there.
Well, look, I think we have to wake up and smell the roses here, that for a lot of people, they are motivated not by what's going on in the Middle East, but by anti-Semitism, by a hatred of Jews. That is a factor. I'm not saying that it's a factor with everyone. Of course it isn't. But there are those. Look, Hamas could have resolved this matter years ago, 2 years ago almost, because it has been on the table that if they released the hostages and agreed to a ceasefire under those conditions, Israel have said openly that they would have stopped. The reality is that Hamas have a founding document, a constitution, which calls not only for the death of all Jews in that region, but the death of Jews around the world. That is the organisation that is now running things in Gaza. So we have found ourselves in a state where the United Kingdom is recognising a Palestinian state where 40% of the land, namely Gaza, is run by Hamas, and where gay people are thrown off tall buildings, and where the Palestinian people themselves are tortured and denied foodstuffs by the Hamas terrorists. So that's the state that the United Kingdom, or part of the state that the United Kingdom has just recognised. We have to see all that in that context.
Sean Woodward, let's bring you in. Yom Kippur has just ended some 9 minutes ago. There's an absolute significance and a direct attack on Jews around the planet for this attack happening today. That doesn't suggest to me that people are in the mood for peace. And I fear that actually the attitude of Hamas not wanting peace seems to be, this cancer seems to be growing on British streets.
Well, conscious that Yom Kippur is just ending and therefore people might now be watching this for the first moment, let's reiterate that all of our thoughts are with everybody who's been affected and hurt right now in Manchester and everywhere else in Britain, and the Prime Minister's words about wanting to hold every Jewish person closer than ever to ourselves right now. I think what we've got to do here is hold two things at the same time, and it's always difficult. You've got to hold, on the one hand, absolutely the right to protect every Jewish person from hatred, but at the same time, you have to respect the right of Palestinians who want peace and who want justice for their own communities as well. And I think you're absolutely right in pointing to the fact that it's at these moments when we might just be about to get an extraordinary breakthrough with this Gaza plan by President Trump, that it's at these moments that we in the media, we in politics, have a greater duty than at any other time to be calm, rational, and to avoid division if we can possibly do it. Now, that's not the same as not condemning violence. all of us on this panel tonight are condemning the violence of today. There's no equivocation on that. There are no ifs, there are no buts. What happened today was wrong and should not happen.
It also felt inevitable.
But it is not the moment to retreat from saying that everything we value in democracy, which includes whether we like the protest or not, the right to be peaceful in your protest, when it crosses into hate, that is something else.
That ship sailed a long time ago.
We may not like it, but at this moment, it's a trap, and it's a trap for all of us. We may not like what may be happening in Parliament Square. You clearly don't, Martin. I'm not out there. I haven't
Today,
walked through it.
days on Yom Kippur, I think the vast majority of people looking at that
if people
will think, lads, take a day off.
If people are protesting peacefully, you may not like it, I may not like it, but I'm glad to live in a democracy where people can. And as a gay man, I know that some people might throw me off the 6th floor of a building in other countries of the world. But that doesn't mean to say that I want to abandon my hope for peace and for building a better world. Okay. And right now, we are in that place with President Trump's 21-point plan, and I think we have a responsibility not to fall into the traps of making it harder.
OK, gentlemen, we've looked there. Sean Woodward, Sir Margaret Ellis, Maajid Nawaz, excellent as ever. Thank you very, very much indeed. And coming next, we'll be speaking to the spokesman from the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. Their statement in response to the attack has just been released. Stay tuned.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GBNews Travel Destinations Forecast.
If you'd like to avoid Storm Amy and you're looking elsewhere across Europe, well, it's also unsettled in Greece and Turkey. Some very wet weather, as well as strong winds blowing through here. Those outbreaks of heavy rain will move through during the weekend, but certainly Friday's a soggy day. Italy, having seen that wet weather earlier in the week, turning drier, albeit still breezy. Plenty of fine weather through Iberia now, sunny spells, and for much of the Mediterranean, it is turning drier through the weekend.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GBNews Travel Destinations Forecast.
Evening, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Pretty wet and windy tonight across the northwest, and tomorrow night could be a notch higher thanks to Storm Amy. That storm is brewing out in the Atlantic, still a way away, but intensifying as we go through the night. Ahead of it, tonight, this low is already causing some problems in Western Scotland, Northern Ireland, some heavy rain here. This band of rain will then swing its way across to England and Wales. So pretty much all of us will see some rain through the night, may get woken up by that, and the gusty winds moving in with it as well. With the wet and windy weather, it will be a warmer night compared to recent nights across the south. And then a bit of a respite into tomorrow, but Storm Amy isn't too far away, already starting to push in across Northern Ireland for tomorrow morning. The things, though, will, at least for a time, be a little calmer across Scotland after some wet and windy weather tonight. Still clearing from the Northern Isles in the morning, but here comes Storm Amy spreading rain. At this stage, fairly light rain across Northern Ireland, extending into parts of Western Scotland during the morning. Still some of the overnight rain across the southeast, so it could be a wet start, especially in Kent, but that should be clearing away. And then we'll have a lull, a brief period where things are a bit drier before the next zone of rain comes in. Getting heavier through the morning across Northern Ireland. Rain warnings are in place for the northwest for Friday afternoon and into the evening. That rain spreading across most areas by the end of Friday afternoon. Temperatures in the teens, but feeling cooler than that with the wet and windy weather. Let's deal with the winds then, because they're really going to pick up as we go through Friday evening. You can see the swirl there. That's the storm system. Amber warning in place from 5 o'clock on Friday across the northwest of Scotland, where gusts of wind may exceed 90 miles an hour. A yellow warning covering much of northern Britain for gusts of wind through Friday night and into Saturday of 60 to maybe 70 miles an hour. Some disruption is likely from this storm system. All the weather warnings are on the Met Office website.
Miriam, you can't be serious. Scrapping the triple lock on state pensions? Madness.
Andrew, we just can't carry on pretending. The numbers just don't add up. We've got to be honest with people. We've got to face the facts. That's what people want.
Well, that's what you get on GB News and on Britain's newsroom. Lively debates, lively conversation.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first, and we're not afraid to hold power to account.
And each other. So join me, Andrew Pearce.
And me, Miriam Gates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m, only on GB News.
Welcome back. Got some breaking news for you now as we react to today's horrific attack on a Manchester synagogue. And Gideon Falter, the chief executive of the campaign against anti-Semitism, has released a blistering statement. It reads, today's attack was made inevitable by the radicalisation of Islamist extremism that had been allowed to spread by successive governments, which have ignored every warning and done practically nothing to tackle it. Now the blood of British Jews cries out from the ground. Those who were murdered today were simply going to synagogue to pray on the holiest day of the Jewish calendar. Their appeasement of extremists, especially those of the far left and radical Islamists, is what has made today's attack inevitable. Today, the blood of British Jews is on the hands of virtue-signalling politicians, police forces, universities and schools, the BBC and regulators like the Charity Commission. We need firm and urgent action on each of these fronts. Otherwise, it is inevitable that yet more innocents will be murdered on our streets. Well, joining me to discuss this is Stephen Silverman, the Director of Investigations and Enforcement at the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. Stephen Silverman, welcome to the show. Thank you for your company on this truly dark day. May I ask you, when you specifically say there that politicians have blood on their hands, do you mean the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer?
Well, look, I think that in the coming days and weeks, when the reasons why this atrocity has happened are examined, it's important to ensure that some very tough realities and facts aren't buried in the weasel words, crocodile tears, and inevitable backside covering that will unfold. The government is complicit. The criminal justice system is complicit. Industry regulators are complicit. Universities are complicit. And our national broadcaster is complicit. All of them, every single one of them could have acted to put the brakes on this rising tide of hatred, which has resulted in the deaths of patriotic Britons who just happen to be Jewish. Instead, they either did nothing or worse, took action that actually inflamed it. They should hang their heads in shame and they need to bear the responsibility for what happened this morning.
Okay, Stephen Silverman, thank you for joining us on Yom Kippur. I know it's been a truly, truly dark day for you and the Jewish community, but thank you for sharing that statement with us and coming on the show tonight. I truly appreciate your time. Let's go live now to Crumpsall and speak to GBNews reporter Anna Riley, who's there on the ground for us. Anna Riley, what's the latest down there as the community tries to come to terms with what's happened today?
A truly dark day, Martin, for the community, not just for the Jewish community, but for the whole community in Manchester, reeling here from yet another terror attack in this city. You may be able to see behind us that there is a cordon still in place where we are here. The road is still closed. Police presence remains in place as these investigations continue throughout the night. We heard earlier from the Greater Manchester Police as well as Scotland Yard as well that these investigations are still ongoing. We know that the suspect was shot at the scene. We do not yet know the suspect's name. We do not know his motivation. Police say that they are aware and that they will release his name in due course. But in terms of the community, we know that there's 4 people still in hospital, 2 people from the Jewish community tragically killed in this horrific incident. And speaking to people here, they've said that they don't feel safe. We've heard from the Prime Minister today. We've also heard from Andy Burnham. We've heard from the Home Office as well. We've heard from Shabana Mahmood that everything is being done to protect the Jewish community, but people here don't feel this. They say that on the holiest of days, Yom Kippur, that this could happen here in Manchester, and some of them were still scared as well that family members were involved in that incident. Luckily, it was such a quick response within 7 minutes of a call being made to police. They were on the scene. Things could have been a lot worse, but speaking to people here, they don't want division. They want the community to come together. They want safety, and they feel that this is yet just another blow to the community. They're looking for answers.
Right, for the latest from Crumpsall, the scene of today's incident. Coming up next, we'll have a response from my panel to that blistering statement from the campaign against anti-Semitism. They believe British politicians have the blood of Jewish people on their hands today. That's next.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m, only on GB News.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience, because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
isn't it?
No,
Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health. Whatever happens in the White House today
will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, D.C.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There, you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Martin Dorby. I want to get some response now from my panel. We had a blistering statement read out by the campaign against anti-Semitism. We had Stephen Silverman on the show a short while ago. He said this: today, the blood of British Jews is on the hands of virtue-signalling politicians who have poured fuel on the fire of extremism. Very, very strong words. To get some reaction from my panel, I'm going to start with you, Maajid Nawaz.
Yeah, Martin, look, Mr Silverman mentioned the government's failure and the police's failure and the institutions. Let me talk about those first two, the government. Keir Starmer needs to recognise that his unilateral approach to the question of the Israel-Palestine conflict is in the way of the regional solution that President Trump's put forward, and he needs to seriously consider that now after this morning's events. The second point about the police. The police promised after Southport to be transparent about the suspects involved in such cases. Now, we all want to know what's gone on here, who's been involved, who's backing them, who's behind them. The police need to be transparent as soon as possible, with speed, so that the nation doesn't misunderstand exactly what's happened here.
Can I also quickly ask you about the allegation that the BBC's bias and their moral collapse has essentially turned them into spokespeople for Hamas?
Well, there is a danger that people in situations like this justify or excuse for, actions of Hamas. And let's make it very clear, Hamas is a terrorist organisation. Hamas, from its founding day till now, doesn't want peace, it wants war. And all of us need to recognise that you don't have to be supporters of Hamas to sympathise with the plight of the people in Gaza.
OK, let's get some reaction now from you, have a good Sean Woodward. An astonishing outburst there on Yom Kippur. The blood of British Jews on the hands of virtue-signalling politicians.
Yeah, look, I understand people's very strong feelings right now, and I'm not in any shape or form going to be in the business of disagreeing with people. What I want to say is this. The first is that the blood today is on the hands of those who committed the violence, and that's unequivocal. Those people who committed the violence, they have their hands in blood. Those who are seeking a peaceful solution, those are the people right now who are really challenged. And I think in particularly these next few days, when it will be Hamas that is terrified of the success of this peace plan on the table, what politicians have got to do now is not weaken their resolve in finding a pathway to peace, but strengthen their resolve. Listen to people like Stephen who feel very intensely, of course, but what we've got to do right now is find every pathway to peace and not abandon it, because that would be the gift to the terrorists.
But it's naive to assume that today's violence happened in a vacuum. Stephen Silverman there
it doesn't happen in a
political backdrop, the protests
Martin,
on the streets, the police turning a blind eye, universities, schools who've tolerated incitement, the BBC, his words, not mine.
The pressure is intense right now, but the responsibility on those seeking a pathway to peace is not right now to buckle, it's to actually get stronger.
So, Michael Ellis.
I think we have to, frankly, take a step back and look at the state of this country. I actually agree with what Mr. Silverman said at the campaign against anti-Semitism. And they're at the coalface here, right? They are dealing with this. This has been blanket coverage news today, but every day of every week for the past 2 years, that charity has been at the coalface of dealing with raw anti-Semitism that's been taking place on the streets of this country and not getting an awful lot of publicity. We've seen episodes. I had, when I was in Parliament, until last year, I had students, Jewish students, coming to see me because they were being subjected to anti-Semitism in universities. Our universities have failed to deal with that. And I think that, frankly, the Jewish people would be entitled to imagine that other minorities would not be so treated. They would have their issues resolved. Jewish people feel that their students are being subjected to anti-Semitism in universities, which they are. There is anti-Semitism episodes that we've heard about in the National Health Service, so people feel that they are concerned about going to get medical treatment. There are reports that Jews feel they have to remove religious symbols because they're worried about that. Our courts have not functioned as I would have hoped that they would in order to protect the Jewish community. And I'm someone who spent my entire life in the legal system, in the criminal justice system. I was called to the bar in 1993. And I'm not happy with the way the courts have dealt and the legal system has dealt with anti-Semitism in this country. So the reality is I can understand why that charity issues a statement like that on the holiest day of the Jewish calendar after a terrorist attack on the soil of this country.
Maajid Nawaz, if I could ask you to reflect upon the final sentence of this blistering statement. The campaign against anti-Semitism claim we need firm and urgent action on all of these fronts. Otherwise, it is inevitable that yet more innocents will be murdered on our streets.
Unfortunately, that sounds to be the case. It does sound like there will be more attacks unless we deal with these issues. Anti-Semitism has been rising. All forms of hatred and extremism have been rising, and they are rising because the enemies of peace know that the way they can stop peace is to continue to fuel the hatred. It hurts me and pains me to hear from the former Attorney General that the Jewish students don't feel comfortable showing off their religious symbolism on campuses. That hurts me and pains me, having been a student on these campuses. In fact, I went to SOAS, where one of the 7/7 bomb attacks went off on Russell Square and Tavistock Square. These are personal events to all of us. We've lived through them. We've got to dial it down in this country. We've got to resume the dialogue and conversation across communities that we know Britain is so good at.
Can I quickly ask you, we've got about 20 seconds, 30 seconds left. The British Muslim community needs to stare its own problems in the face and account for them.
Well, I would agree with that, something I've been trying to do for a long time. I would say it's a lot better now. This attacker appeared to have some form of fake or real suicide belt on him. That's reminiscent of ISIS-style attacks. We don't know who he is just yet, but of course, since the defeat of ISIS, British Muslims have become a lot more vocal on terrorism. If I have anything to do with it, they'll become a lot more as well.
Gentlemen, thank you. An excellent, thought-provoking show. We have to leave it there. Maajid Nawaz, Sean Woodward and Sir Michael Ellis, thank you very much for your company tonight. And thanks to you all out there on a dark day, Yom Kippur, as the sun sets on a dark day in British history. Up next, the State of the Nation, and your host tonight is Chris Vober. See you tomorrow, 3 till 6.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Evening, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Pretty wet and windy tonight across the northwest, and tomorrow night could be a notch higher thanks to Storm Amy. That storm is brewing out in the Atlantic, still a way away, but intensifying as we go through the night. Ahead of it, tonight, this low is already causing some problems in western Scotland, Northern Ireland, some heavy rain here. This band of rain will then swing its way across England and Wales, so pretty much all of us will see some rain through the night, may get woken up by that, and the gusty winds moving in with it as well. With the wet and windy weather, it will be a warmer night compared to recent nights across the south. And then a bit of a respite into tomorrow, but Storm Amy isn't too far away, already starting to push in across Northern Ireland for tomorrow morning. The things, though, will, at least for a time, be a little calmer across Scotland after some wet and windy weather tonight. Still clearing from the Northern Isles in the morning, but here comes Storm Amy spreading rain. At this stage, fairly light rain across Northern Ireland, extending into parts of western Scotland during the morning. Still some of the overnight rain across the southeast, so it could be a wet start, especially in Kent, but that should be clearing away. And then we'll have a lull, a brief period where things are a bit drier before the next zone of rain comes in. Getting heavier through the morning across Northern Ireland. Rain warnings are in place for the northwest for Friday afternoon and into the evening. That rain spreading across most areas by the end of Friday afternoon. Temperatures in the teens, but feeling cooler than that with the wet and windy weather. Let's deal with the winds then, because they're really going to pick up as we go through Friday evening. You can see the swirl there. That's the storm system. Amber warning in place from 5 o'clock on Friday across the northwest of Scotland, where gusts of wind may exceed 90 miles an hour. A yellow covering much of northern Britain for gusts of